Tonight, Capitol safety.
We must be adequately staffed to handle these events. We are not currently.
A surge in threats against lawmakers has Capitol Hill police working overtime. Plus, indictment audio.
This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information.
Former President Trump talks classified documents on tape. And AI ministry.
The genie's not only out of the bottle, but at this point, I don't see us turning back.
The potential and danger of artificial intelligence. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. From the campaign trail to the Hill, new concerns over the safety of lawmakers. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. As the 2024 campaign ramps up, so do concerns over political rhetoric, potentially leading to threats against candidates, lawmakers, and other public figures. Security experts warn violence is more likely when lawmakers are away from Washington, and that leaves an already stretched Capitol Hill police force struggling to keep up with any threat environment. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has our top story.
Threats against lawmakers have surged 400% over the last 6 years, and Capitol Police maintain in order to fulfill their duty of keeping Congress safe, it's going to require an updated model of law enforcement.
The old approach to member security has been replaced by the need to protect the member's environment, as well as the member's family, both in Washington, D.C. and at their home.
The need for such a shift became evident last year. First, with a violent attack on the husband of former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in their home, and more recently against staff members at the district headquarters of Representative Gary Connolly, a Democrat from Virginia.
And the increasingly heated political rhetoric further heightened the prospect of future security risks and challenges. We must be adequately staffed to handle these events. We are not currently.
Donnell Harvin, former chief of D.C. Homeland Security and Intelligence, tells CBN News both right and left-wing extremists use comments from high-profile lawmakers as a call to mobilize.
There are lawmakers who put things out there. They make statements. They send tweets. And to them, it may be benign, right? They may feel like they're appealing to their base or giving the people that vote for them or their constituents exactly what they want to hear from their perspective. Meanwhile, those words can easily convert to violence amongst individuals who don't take them just as words.
As an example, Harvin points to comments made ahead of the ruling that eventually overturned Roe v. Wade.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
That demonization can lead to what we call stochastic terrorism. And that's when there is a specific threat of violence or actual violence against an individual because they've been demonized by a group or an individual that is prominent.
Months later, authorities stopped an assassination attempt near the home of Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Harvin, like Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger, believes these violent threats will only increase now that the 2024 campaign is underway, and predicts the overall lack of trust in the federal government will only make things worse.
I think that we're living in a time in which there is great degradation of public trust in public institutions. And so anything that the federal government would tell them to make them safer or protect them is going to be seen with skepticism.
Chief Manger is asking Congress for a $106.3 million budget increase, something he says is necessary if his department is going to keep growing, transforming, and staying ahead of the threats. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Former President Donald Trump is blasting back about the release of audio recordings where he appears to acknowledge that he kept a top-secret document after leaving office. Trump calling the release an exoneration. In the recordings, he also appears to acknowledge his limitations over classifying documents post-presidency.
Yeah. See, as president, I could have did less about it. Now I can't, but this is classic. No. This totally wins my case, Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information.
The audio is a key feature in the 49-page, 37-count indictment charging Trump with mishandling classified information and obstructing the federal government's effort to get back sensitive material. And for more on this, we're joined by Rick Klein, political director of ABC News. Rick, welcome. Always good to see you. So Trump calls it an exoneration. How do you interpret these audio recordings?
That's not how I hear it, and it's hard to understand exactly what he's referring to. He appears to acknowledge that he's in possession of documents that are indeed classified. He's said now that he hasn't heard the recording. He says it was selectively released. He also says that he was referring to newspaper clippings and the like. I'd imagine that what's going to be more important now is what others in the room at that time have to say about it. One has to assume that the special counsel has talked to the other individuals, including Mark Meadows, co-author on a book that he was writing at the time. Anyone else in the room would be asked exactly what the former president was talking about, what he's referring to, because there it is, I think, pretty clearly in the audio and also the transcript that was in the indictment, appearing to acknowledge that he was in possession of information that was classified, and even acknowledgement that he couldn't further work to declassify it. Whatever his spin is on it, the audio speaks, I think, pretty loudly, and the testimony of what others have to say, what they say actually happened in the room, I think will be important as well.
Yeah, and most legal people will say that these charges are troubling for sure. Rick, we hear a lot that no one is above the law. Is that really true? Many are pointing to Hillary Clinton and Hunter Biden especially and saying that they got special treatment.
Well, I think, specifically on the phrase "no one is above the law," I mean, the idea that a former president could be indicted, I think, speaks very loudly to that same proposition. I think about the Clinton and the Hunter Biden cases. These were allegations that have been out there for a long time. President Trump literally ran for election on cries of "lock her up," and 4 years he ran the Justice Department. They never found any criminality in what Hillary Clinton did. They also didn't find any finality in criminality for Hunter Biden. We know that the special counsel, or not the special counsel, the U.S. attorney in Delaware, who was a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, kept on by the Biden administration, found a reason to bring charges that reached a plea arrangement. We don't know that he's done yet. I think you have to take the facts in the individual cases on their own merits and recognize that there have been prosecutors, there have been investigatory authorities that have looked at lots of individuals, including the two that you just referenced, and have found various degrees of culpability. And I don't think it's fair or right to necessarily equate them. I think the process is what it is. And moving forward, it's not clear that Hunter Biden's out of the woods. And I do think that anything that was alleged around Hillary Clinton did not appear to reach a criminal standard even under the 4 years of Trump, much less the 2+ years of Biden.
Yeah, a lot on the right are saying that she deleted all of those emails and got a different treatment. But moving on from that, President Biden, he hosted former President Obama for lunch at the White House today. Rick, what can you tell us about that? And how much influence do you think Obama has on this current administration?
Yeah, to be a fly on the wall. I mean, look, they're obviously friends, and they can have conversations whenever they like. The fact that this was on the public schedule made it a little unusual. The fact that he'd be coming there, a lot of people wondering what kind of role Obama is going to play in the Biden administration. They're maybe not as close as people might think. It was certainly a union of some convenience between the two of them in running. I don't think they were close personal friends before becoming running mates. They obviously formed a very strong and fierce partnership. But what I've been told by people that are close to Biden is he's never felt like he's particularly indebted to Obama in the need to go follow any direction. He respects the political instincts. He respects what he was able to do in getting elected and then reelected, and kind of vaulting him back into national prominence, into the viability of running. But I don't think that it's fair to characterize this as some kind of an arrangement where Obama's calling the shots or as a potential puppet master. I know a lot of people have been saying, someone going to come in and tell Biden that it's not right for him to run again. I don't think that Obama would do that. I don't think he'd be in a position to do it. And I don't think that Biden would even necessarily take his advice.
Yeah, I think you're right. To be a fly on the wall, that would certainly be an interesting lunch to be at. Rick Klein with ABC News, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Hey, thanks. Good. Thanks for having me.
Well, to the Supreme Court, the justices issued a major decision over voting rights today, siding with a lower North Carolina court for striking down a congressional districting plan for violating state law. The case, Moore v. Harper, was brought after an updated census in 2020 gave North Carolina an additional seat in the U.S. House. This also allowed the Republican-controlled legislature a chance to redraw its election map. Multiple lawsuits found the map was gerrymandered to benefit the Republican Party. The decision by the High Court gives state courts the power to check state legislatures when dealing with federal elections within limits. And with that, let's bring in Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Fellow in the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Hans, good to have you with us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So the ruling does suggest limits to a state court's ability to police elections and Congress and the president. What do you make of this ruling?
I actually think the court made a mistake, and I think Justice Thomas actually had it correct in his dissent. Look, there's no question that state legislatures don't have a completely open hand when they're doing redistricting. Congress can overrule what they do. They're also subject to federal laws like the Voting Rights Act. But the exact situation in this case was that the North Carolina State Supreme Court overruled and threw out the redistricting plan when they had no legal authority to do it. They claimed that partisan gerrymandering violated the state constitution. There's nothing in the state constitution that says anything or puts any restrictions on partisan gerrymandering. That was really the problem. They acted, the state court, without any legal authority to do so.
So this is not the first case for the High Court this term dealing with voting rights.
Right.
The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Black Alabama voters a few weeks ago in the Defense of Voting Rights Act, and just yesterday dismissing Louisiana's appeal of a ruling that found racial gerrymandering. Were you surprised by those decisions, Hans?
Yeah, in particular because in the Alabama case, again, the Supreme Court ignored its prior precedents. The Alabama case was one in which the challengers said that because the black population of the state is about a quarter of the state, they were entitled to 2 of the 7 congressional districts, and unfortunately, the Supreme Court agreed with that. The problem is the Voting Rights Act specifically prohibits proportional representation, and the court has said in the past that it's not going to approve redistricting plans in which the major factor used to draw up the boundary lines was race. They just kind of ignored their prior holdings and ruled in favor of the challengers and against Alabama. I think it was an error.
Yeah. There's also another redistricting case from Ohio that's pending. Do you think the justices will have any more to say about this issue before the election in 2024?
Yeah, I think they will. I hope that they finally start getting some of these redistricting cases right, and that means actually following their prior precedents is something that I don't think they've properly done.
Well, all right, Hans von Spakovsky with the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And coming up, it's now estimated 700 migrants were on a boat that sank off the coast of Greece earlier this month. Who's facing criminal charges in the case? It's one of the deadliest incidents in the central Mediterranean Sea. An estimated 700 migrants were on a boat that sank earlier this month off the coast of Greece. Only 104 people have been rescued, 82 bodies recovered. Many still remain missing. So far, Pakistani police have arrested at least 17 alleged human traffickers in connection with the case. 9 Egyptian men believed to have crewed the ship face charges in Greece, including participating in a criminal organization. To Russia, where authorities are dropping charges against Yevgeny Prigozhin, officially closing a criminal investigation into the Wagner warlord who led an armed rebellion over the weekend. For his part, Russian President Vladimir Putin is reasserting control in an address to the nation, the first speech in the wake of the revolt. Putin hailed Russian forces for averting what he called a civil war. Putin also demanded Wagner Group rebels swear allegiance to the Russian Defense Ministry or leave the country to join Prigozhin in exile in neighboring Belarus. George Thomas is our senior international correspondent, and he joins us now. So, George, the developments over the weekend, stunning. How close was Russia to a real civil war?
Yeah, they certainly were stunning, Jenna. To borrow a phrase from William Shakespeare, when you unleash the dogs of war, sometimes those dogs come back to bite you. And in this case, the big dog here in the war against Russia's war against Ukraine was the head of this mercenary group, the Wagner Group. And in essence, he expressed his dissatisfaction against Putin's two top generals who were running the military offensive in Ukraine for the last year and a half. And he was basically saying, listen, we're losing, we're getting our behinds kicked on the battlefield, and no one is doing anything to change course, change tactics. And my men, along with the Russian military, we're losing tens of thousands of people, either dead or injured. We're losing thousands of pieces of equipment, military equipment on the battlefield. And look, he made it all the way almost 120 miles just short of Moscow. The fact that his forces were able to come all the way from Rostov in the south, drive down the main highway leading to Moscow and not be intercepted by any Russian military to stop the convoy really says a lot about the sort of security apparatus today in Russia. But it also goes to point to Putin's sort of air of invincibility around himself. I mean, because the sense that he had an iron grip on the country, was able to unleash his forces and stop this, didn't happen. The Vladimir Putin of today is a lot weaker than he was last week. And I think we're going to see the ripple effects of this in the days, weeks, and months ahead.
Yeah, the weekend definitely made him look like more or less of a paper tiger, if
exactly.
you will. Yep. You know, when we talk about Ukraine, do you think this changes Putin's calculus for the war there?
Well, I mean, look, I think the Wagner Group was the most trained and effective troops that were deployed by the Russian army against, whether it's in Crimea or in this latest battle in Ukraine launched more than a year ago. But the reality is that the Ukrainians have been beating these guys back. They've not gained a whole lot of territory since the war started back on February 24th. The counteroffensive that the Ukrainians were hoping to launch in the last few weeks is also kind of bogged down, Jenna. You know, they're trying to make a push to the Kherson region to cross the critical Dnipro River. You'll remember several weeks ago there was this massive explosion that unleashed all this water in the neighborhoods around Kherson. The Ukrainians have been trying to launch a counteroffensive. It has been slow. But look, I think for the Ukrainians and for the U.S., what has happened, what transpired this past week just shows that there is no unity necessarily to speak of within the Russian military or, for that matter, within the Russian society.
George Thomas, it's always good to see you. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Well, here's a new one, how artificial intelligence could help spread the gospel. Find out when we come back. Welcome back. Artificial intelligence is grabbing headlines for its potential for good and potential for threat. But now some Christian groups are looking at AI's capacity for spreading the gospel. Gary Lane takes a look at the dangers and benefits of artificial intelligence to Christian ministry.
Some of the top executives in the artificial intelligence industry warn future advancement could one day become dangerous to humankind. That's why groups like the Center for AI Safety warn we should take steps now to develop the technology responsibly.
We can enjoy the positives if we bring AI development to a more cautious risk level.
The executives fear that a rapid advance in AI may lead to the loss of millions of jobs, and quantum leaps in language technology, like ChatGPT, could be used maliciously to spread propaganda and disinformation. Christian groups believe that development poses major risks to missionaries. For instance, John Hurst of SIL International suggests Christian adversaries could use AI to harm or embarrass ministries and their workers.
A government could create an AI-based thing that has one of our missionaries saying something against the government and post it on social media. And then you're going to have to assess, did they really say that? If they didn't say it, how do we combat it? How do we respond to that?
Hurst urges ministries to work together on systems and processes to validate identities. Ted Esler is president of Missio Nexus, an association of U.S. and Canadian agencies and churches. He believes AI is here to stay and sees tremendous potential.
The genie's not only out of the bottle, but at this point, I don't see us turning back. Now, I don't see missionaries being automated anytime soon, but the many applications that are going to be available to us really has created this new wild frontier, and its impact is going to be huge.
That could mean limitless opportunities for Christian ministry. For example, Bible translators are already using AI in their work on scripture translations, thus speeding up that overall process. Online chatbots could also be used to direct people to the Bible and Christian resources in more than 4,000 languages, helping overcome cross-cultural communication obstacles.
The ability to go from one language to another, the barriers are quickly being reduced. Interacting between languages in ministry work, whether it's church planning, discipleship, planning meetings, all these things, is going to go through some fairly dramatic pivots and shifts over the next few years.
And that's why Hurst and other ministry leaders believe it is important for Christians to keep their focus on who's behind the controls of the AI revolution.
Are we allowing and designing our systems and our ministries and our structures to make sure the human stays in the pilot seat, and actually make sure that God is in the pilot seat, that we are looking to God, and that we are using technology like that?
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Still ahead, a lifelong dog lover treated to a special surprise on his 100th birthday. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, when a group of siblings began brainstorming ideas for their father's 100th birthday, there was one non-negotiable. There had to be dogs. One daughter posted on Facebook asking people in the San Jose area to stop by for a pet parade on her father, Robert Moore's special day. When that day arrived, so did hundreds of dogs. Shortly after the parade started, more than 200 canines arrived, each patiently waiting for their turn to be petted, some driving more than 10 miles to get there. The event was sweet for really everyone who was there, including one special guest with Alzheimer's disease who came with his daughter and dog, Lucky. Robert's family said he couldn't stop smiling, the centenarian calling it a dream come true. And happy birthday to him. That's a great note to leave us on tonight. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow.